So good morning everybody. I hope you all have joined. You had a class from 10 to 11. So I, I think you've got a break of 10 minutes now. So we'll start. Today our main topic will be mainly dealing with the unfinished part of CSOM, that is mainly the investigation and management, and then we will go to the complications of CSOM. So first, when you will be asked how to manage a case of CSOM, whenever you are asked management, you have to imagine a patient who has come to you right from examining, investigating, and then treating the patient, which will include conservative management and surgical. So the end point of his treatment, that whole thing covers managing a patient. So when you see a case, ideally your approach should be, even for your clinical subjects, now that you will be having your postings, your wards later when you'll have, try to follow the patient. The patient from the time when he is coming to OPD to the time he is getting discharged. What are the step-by-step things which are done to cure the patient of his illness? That the whole spectrum includes management. So investigation, all this we were actually discussing the X-ray in detail in the last class, right? So the first thing is examination under microscope. Let me maximize. So this examination under microscope, usually microscope is kept in the minor OT or in your operation theatre. So sometimes in some patients, apart from examination under a bull's eye lamp and examination in otoscope, stage 3 is examination under a proper microscope. That may be done to confirm the otoscopic findings, to confirm the site, the size, the margins of the perforation, to look into the medullary mucosa, whether there is a polyp, whether there is cholesteatoma, if you are finding something suspicious, or even if you are finding malignancy, you are suspecting anything abnormal, you can always confirm it by looking under the microscope. Then this is the audiometry. So first is looking under the microscope, second is performing a pure tone audiometry. This is a graphical representation of the amount of hearing loss that the patient has suffered. So you have to, this is a very significant and important step in the pre-operative management. You have to ascertain what is the degree of hearing loss. Clinically, how can you assess it? Yes, you can. You can assess it with the help of a tuning fork test. And then you have to further confirm your diagnosis by doing this test. Now this test is first a graphical presentation. You can accurately measure what is the amount of hearing loss, and second, importance of pure tone audiometry is it has an immense medico-legal benefit. Tomorrow if the patient says that my operation post hearing is worse than the pre-operative status, then you have something to show him that look, this was the initial hearing loss. So your ears were already having a huge amount of hearing loss, and then post-operative, this is the status. So this is very important medico-legally, because this is a graph, you can show it on paper, whereas a tuning fork test is totally a subjective test. You are ascertaining, you are yourself deciding what is the degree, okay, but you cannot prove it if you need to prove it later on. So this is very important when you are planning to operate the patient. It can definitely differentiate between conductive and sensory neural hearing loss and the degree of hearing loss. Then coming to the radiological interpretation. So X-ray of the mastoids, this is what we were doing, and this I want to discuss with you because this is X-ray. You will be having a separate table during exams, and I don't know how far actually we'll be able to revise these things before exams. So at least what you can do is right now you try to understand as much as possible. This is almost like the X-ray you will be getting in your exam. This is the X-ray film. This X-ray film is actually X-ray of the skull, showing the temporal region, the mastoids, and including this whole mastoid air cells, and the view. What is the view? The view is a lateral oblique view or Law's view. Okay, Law's view is the most common view that is used to take an X-ray of the mastoid region. As you can see, see, this is the anterior aspect, this is the posterior aspect. Whenever you are examining an X-ray, be it an X-ray of ear, nose, throat, chest, abdomen, wherever, first orient yourself to the X-ray. Usually X-ray of thorax and abdomen is more or less, relatively it's easy because it is antero-posterior, okay. But in case of X-rays of ENT, what happens is there are many angulations, and we have to change the angulation sometimes to see particular areas. So you have to orient yourself to the X-ray first. This is the superior part, this is the inferior part. This is the anterior and this is the posterior. So anterior posterior means in what respect? With the patient's perspective. Imagine the patient sitting in front of you with his face laterally, okay, and this is his anterior aspect of the face, this is the posterior aspect. So this is the occiput, this is the somewhere here are the nasal bones. So here if you can appreciate, this will be the mandible, okay, ramus of the mandible. And can you see here the condyle of the mandible? This is the relatively the space, this is more radiopaque and this is a radiolucent space. This is the temporomandibular joint space where my arrow is moving. This is a telltale sign that this is the TM joint. Whenever you are trying to locate the mastoid, always locate the TM joint first, because then that will orient you to anterior posterior aspect. The moment you are able to locate the TM joint, then second thing you will locate is the opening of external auditory meatus. Can you all appreciate? This is the opening of external auditory meatus. So I had told you in X-ray, air is black, bone is white, anything in between is anything between black and white. So the terms used, if it is white, you call it as radio opaque. These are areas of radiolucency. See, bone is white, complete white. Wherever you have soft tissue overlapping, you get areas of radiolucency. And this is complete black because it has air of the external auditory meatus. Then the area immediately behind it is the mastoid area. So this is our main focus area, okay. Mastoid region we want to view before the operation, before planning the treatment of the patient. Why? Because a patient who is having a chronic otitis media, there is some pathology going on inside and it has been going on for years. So then you suspect that the pathology has some sort of reservoir and certain chronic changes. What are the chronic changes? Mastoid pneumatization. Now for this, you all must have an idea about the pneumatization of mastoid. How a normal mastoid will look like. A normal mastoid will have, what is the normal appearance of mastoid? Radiologically honeycomb appearance, okay. That means air cells and in between intervening bony septations. So just like a honeycomb, that is a normal mastoid, okay. Now this mastoid is not normal. Why? Can you see areas which are relatively more white? Clear cut intervening septum you cannot see, especially in this area. Why? This area is showing zones of sclerosis. What do you mean by sclerosis? Bony deposition. If the amount of bony deposition increases in the mastoid, that means it is signs of sclerosis. Sclerosis indicates that the patient has undergone several attacks of CSOM. The mastoid air cells have undergone several episodes of osteitis and hyperemic decalcification and then new bone formation. So gradually over the years, the nice healthy air pockets have been replaced by sclerosis, and now there is more of bone which is unhealthy and less of air pockets. What is the problem then? If you have bone, okay, your mastoid is strong. So what is the problem then? The problem is air pockets are less, lining epithelium is less now. What is the main function of mastoid? It is a ventilatory surface for the ears. Mastoid contains air that gives ventilation to the entire middle ear and maintains the normal physiology of the ear. The moment the mastoid air cells are sclerosed, converted into bone, their ventilatory efficiency decreases. So then what will happen? Aeration will be hampered, the middle ear pressure cannot be maintained normally, and hypertrophic changes will continue in your middle ear. So that will again lead to repeated attacks of CSOM. So sclerosis, you can say, is a vicious cycle. Sclerosis further promotes repeated attacks of CSOM, and repeated attacks create more of sclerosis. So then there begins a vicious cycle wherein gradually more and more of this sclerosis and white bony deposition will occur. So this is the main thing you want to see, whether what is the condition of mastoid. Had it been healthy, it would have been more, you would have seen more of blackish areas with intervening septa. That is known as a well pneumatized mastoid. Pneumatic means what? Air. So air is present in the mastoid, which is good. So well pneumatized mastoid with intervening bony septa is healthy. This is not a healthy thing. And second, let us study few anatomical landmarks. If you can, again have to come to this original orientation. This is the TM joint. So this is superior aspect, this is the inferior aspect. Superiorly, this is the dural plate. Okay. Why dural plate? Above it lies the middle cranial fossa. So middle cranial fossa is lined by middle cranial fossa dura. So this whitish structure that you can see very clearly in this X-ray is dural plate. Similarly, below, inferiorly, you can see a whitish line. This is nothing but impression of the sigmoid sinus. So this is known as sinus plate. These two are clear anatomical landmarks which are giving your extreme boundary to the mastoid region. Mastoid region does not extend beyond this dural plate and beyond the sinus plate. Okay. The portion within this is known as the mastoid region. This angle is known as, I know, you all know by this time. So this angle is known as sinodural angle. Very simple. Dural plate, sinus plate, in between is an angle which is known as sinodural angle. Other name of this angle is Siteli's angle. So this whole radiology is very relevant because you do an X-ray, you can assess what is the extent of disease or damage that has occurred, and then you can plan the surgical management of this patient accordingly. So what are the uses of X-ray mastoid? To locate the position of dural and sinus plates, to see for the type of pneumatization. This again you all know it. What are the types? Cellular, diploid and sclerotic. What is the meaning? Cellular means there is a lot of bone and there is a lot of air. Sclerotic is more of bone, and diploid is a combination. And normally we have, more commonly people have a cellular mastoid, less commonly sclerotic. Cholesteatoma. Okay. Cholesteatoma is, even in X-ray sometimes you can see cholesteatoma in the mastoid region, though nowadays if we are suspecting cholesteatoma we prefer CT scan. Okay, but the initial diagnosis can be made from X-ray as well. What are the typical appearance? Typical appearance is the cotton wool appearance. If you see, what is cotton wool? What relevance it has to the X-ray? In X-ray the cotton wool will look like fluffy opacities. Okay, area of radio opacity surrounded by areas of radiolucency and fluffy. The margins will not be clear cut. Intervening bony septa will have clear cut margins. They are healthy bone. Okay, honeycomb appearance which I was talking about. But if it is a cholesteatoma, it's an eaten away bone, and the cholesteatoma itself is nothing but a keratin debris. It will have a fluffy balls. The margins will not be very clear, and there will be areas of radio opacity with patchy areas of radiolucency. That is a typical cotton ball appearance seen in cholesteatoma. Bone destruction, that is frank clear cut osteolysis, bony destruction. And sometimes it can be a mastoid, big dark black space within the mastoid. That means a lot of air with no bony septa, no cholesteatoma, nothing. That means it is a huge cavity. Again, a very big cavity with no intervening bony septa. That is not normal. A very big cavity with a huge dark air within it. That means either this patient has had previously an episode of mastoid abscess. The abscess has drained out. Now what remains is a big cavity. Okay, so these are all the features which you can see in an X-ray mastoid. So this was to cover your radiological aspect. Now the other investigations, okay, these are routine parameters which we do before any surgery. X-ray of VNS. Now this is important. Sometimes in some patients of CSOM, we need to do X-ray of the PNS. PNS means paranasal sinuses. So X-ray of nose and paranasal sinuses is sometimes important to do in patients with CSOM. Why? Because suppose the patient has some pathology in the paranasal sinuses or in the nasal framework also, that can predispose to CSOM. So if you do not treat the sinus pathology and treat the ear, what will be the probability? The patient can develop recurrence because the causing factor, the main etiology has not been treated. Suppose the patient has a severe DNS. His ventilation is impaired, due to which his eustachian tube function was damaged and he has developed CSOM. There is no point in correcting the tympanic membrane perforation without correcting this pathology. Am I clear? So that is why sometimes you have to first decide what is the cause or nature of or the etiology of the disease, and then you have to treat that first. So that especially in children with CSOM, you have to do a PNS, you have to do X-ray of adenoids to rule out other probable causes. What are the medical treatment? Elimination of infection by giving proper course of antibiotics, by cleaning the ears routinely so that no debris is present. Long term goals, improvement of hearing and treating the perforation. So what is the meaning of oral toileting? You can do dry mopping or wet mopping or suction irrigation. Wet mopping is you take some solution on the cotton tip and you mop it like antibiotic drop or something. Dry mopping is simply with the cotton swab you are cleaning it, and suction irrigation under microscope. And then topical and systemic antibiotics. Now cause of failure. So first we always try to treat it by medical treatment. If the patient has had only one attack of CSOM, we wait for some time. We only keep them on conservative treatment. Okay, but we see that even in spite of proper antibiotics, patient is getting repeated attacks. Then what happens? Either it may be because of excessive inflammation which is not getting controlled. Patient is getting persistent osteitis with granulations. The organism is very virulent and resistant to the antibiotics that you are giving. This is what I just said. You have not treated the cause of the disease, adenoids, sinuses which are harboring infections. They are there and you are only focusing on the ear. Then that will not solve the problem. Allergy and mastoid reservoir. So that is, defect is in the mastoid and you are only targeting at closing the tympanic membrane perforation. Again, that will not. So you have to see what is the cause. You have to treat accordingly. Surgical procedures. Myringoplasty, that is repair of the tympanic membrane alone, is myringoplasty. Tympanoplasty is, please pay attention, an operation performed to eradicate disease in the middle ear, to reconstruct the hearing mechanism, if necessary accompanied by a mastoid surgery with or without tympanic membrane grafting. This whole thing includes tympanoplasty. Many of you confuse between myringoplasty and tympanoplasty. There is a perforation. If you are just closing the perforation and not doing anything else, that is known as myringoplasty. Tympanum, entire middle ear. If you are treating the entire middle ear, you are trying to eradicate disease in the middle ear. That means you are examining the middle ear. Whatever, if there is a polyp, you are taking care of it. If there is a granulation tissue, you are checking what is the cause. If the ossicles are damaged, you are reconstructing the hearing mechanism. If the patient requires a mastoid surgery, you may do it, followed by a tympanic membrane grafting. And sometimes if situation may arise, you may not even do tympanic membrane grafting, but you are eradicating the disease from the middle ear. That is known as tympanoplasty. Ossiculoplasty is only simple repair or reconstruction of the ossicular chain. So ossiculoplasty is often a adjunctive associated feature. Along with tympanoplasty, we do ossiculoplasty. Okay? Now, coming to complications. So, this is the third aspect: safe CSOM, unsafe CSOM, complications of CSOM. Together, we can then we'll cover the CSOM So now, anybody has any doubt? Yes, no, whatever, you write me. Otherwise, I don't get a clue whether you are following. I'm going to wait for 2 minutes. Anybody has any doubt? Please be very frank with your doubts. The moment you say, I don't have doubts, then I really... No doubt? Nobody? Okay, so you all are... Anybody from the batch who have not attended those many classes? Okay, so nobody is having any doubts, right? Okay, so you are following. That's very good. So let's begin with complications of CSOM. So normally, complication will occur only because CSOM uncontrolled will spread to adjacent areas. And that day I told you, ear is surrounded by many vital organs, brain surrounding it almost 70%, remaining is your anteriorly the TM joint, below are the important vessels which are going to the neck. Okay, very important. The vessels, the cranial nerves. So, infection anywhere is dangerous. Infection spreading beyond the mucoperiosteal lining of middle ear cleft. The moment it breaches that mucoperiosteal lining, that means it has started to spread. What are the immediate neighboring vital structures? Facial nerve, inner ear, inner ear is a part of the ear, dural venous sinuses, meninges, brain tissue, extratemporal soft tissue, anywhere it can spread. So, complications commonly divided into intracranial and extracranial part. Try to picturize this thing. You will never forget the name of the complications. Okay, you don't need to memorize it. You just try to localize which portion is in which part. So, let us first discuss the extracranial part. Okay, extracranial further divided into intratemporal and extratemporal. So, the proximity, let us discuss those regions which are most proximal. The areas, we are always concerned with our immediate neighbors, no? More. India is more concerned about Pakistan and China rather than concerning about distant nations. Why? Because they are immediate neighbors. So we are also more concerned about immediate areas. Mastoiditis, mastoid is behind it. Labyrinth, obviously inner ear. Petrous apex. What is petrous apex? Petrous apex is the bone. For this you have to study the skull base. You have studied it. So this petrous apex is a very important structure. Why? Because many cranial nerves are passing through that part in close proximity. Then facial nerve, sensory neural hearing loss because of cochlear involvement. So all these are intratemporal complications. We are more concerned about these complications because they are immediately adjacent and they are more common also. Okay. Now extracranial, subperiosteal abscesses. The moment they have breached that mucoperiosteal lining but not entered into the brain, that is the stage where they are extratemporal. And then coming to the intracranial part. Okay, intracranial, again all the possible things you can think of infections in the brain. Okay, involving the meninges. First it will involve the meninges, so meningitis. Further it will go extradural abscess, subdural empyema, involving the lateral sinus. Then brain abscess, CSF leak, otorrhea, that is CSF flowing out through the ear. So you can imagine how dangerous that is. And otitic hydrocephalus. What is the root? How does it spread so much? One is direct anatomical dehiscence. If you look at the skull base, the bone itself has certain fissures. So direct anatomical openings from which pus can easily go through. Jugular bulb, dural plate, canals. You have so many foramen, you have so many fissures, canals in the skull base. Erosion, cholesteatoma. So cholesteatoma itself is bone eroding. So it will eat away the bone. And trauma. Sometimes a patient with CSOM, suppose now has a road traffic accident, he has a trauma and there is a fracture. So now that fracture has created, fracture where? Fracture anywhere around the temporal bone. So then that has made a pathway through which the infection now will spread rapidly. And normal anatomical pathways oval window, round window, and all the aqueducts. Okay. Or blood-borne, obviously, any infected thrombus or through the venous spread. So blood-borne is there, and through the small arterioles, periarterial spread of Virchow Robins. So this is through small arterioles they can spread. So the main route of access are direct bony defects, normal anatomical pathways, and blood-borne. What is this diagram? Looking complicated, but it is not. This is the ear. Okay, cochlea, labyrinth. So this is the ear. This yellow color structure is a facial nerve. So right now, ear doesn't mean the pinna. Okay, that is up to class 10th or plus 2. Ear means the pinna. Ear means mainly this thing. And what are the structures nearby? Important structures, I told you, the sinus plate and the dural plate. So the middle cranial fossa dura is here. Can you see the dura mater? The sigmoid sinus behind. Then the brain immediately sitting over it. So this is the middle cranial fossa with the brain. Here what will be there? The cerebellum. Okay, cerebellum is here. So once you remember what are the adjacent structures, you can easily write the complications. Okay, so labyrinth is getting involved, labyrinthitis, facial nerve paralysis, cochlea getting involved. So actually this arrow should point here. This is the cochlea leading to sensorineural hearing loss. Coalescent mastoiditis, the mastoid itself has undergone complication. Here thrombus in the lateral sinus, thrombophlebitis, abscesses, extradural, subdural, within the brain, cerebral cortex, within the cortex, cerebral abscess, meningitis, and cerebellar abscess. Okay, so if you remember this diagram, you can already write down 15-20 points. So first coming to the extracranial, extratemporal complications, subperiosteal abscess. So remember, God has given us certain barriers. These barriers are very protective in nature. What are the barriers that you know? You know about blood-brain barrier, right? It was protective in nature. Normally, microorganisms cannot invade unless there is low immunity, some trauma, or some very virulent organism has invaded. Normally, they provide a lot of protection. Similarly, the mucoperiosteum, that is the bone, there is a periosteal lining and the mucosa. So that mucosa with the periosteum is actually a very hard, resilient structure. Hard not in sense of consistency, it's very protective in nature. It tries to contain the infection within itself. Okay, but a stage comes when the infection does not remain contained within the mucoperiosteal lining. And then it breaches. That is, it breaks away, it gives away. And then the abscess, the pus will drain out through whatever route it can. That is the reason, as long as it can contain, it will form a tense swelling, but it will still contain it. But until that time, if the infection is not controlled, then it will spread out to various regions. So extension of mastoid infection through the cortex and air cells into the subperiosteal region. So what is the meaning? Please, whenever you're coming across these kind of terms, try to break them. Subperiosteal. Periosteum, sub, beneath the periosteum. So the infection has now breached, it has formed an abscess, the mucoperiosteum is gone, bone has eroded, it is now going out. Mastoid abscess. These are various other very important names. Names are looking complicated. Again, if you remember the anatomy, nothing is difficult. Von Bizold's abscess, Lux abscess, zygomatic abscess, Citelli's abscess, parapharyngeal or retropharyngeal abscess. Depending on what is the location where the pus is spreading, that these names have been given. Do we have a diagram? Yeah. This is a initially abscess formation, and then this abscess has ruptured, the pus has come out. Now the patient has developed a fistula. Okay, this was a mastoid abscess. Simple. Mastoid region had a huge abscess, it has ruptured, pus has come out, then it has healed. This is a case of mastoid abscess sequelae. Now, coming to this diagram. If you study by reading diagrams, you don't need to study the theory. So here, now first you try to localize. I told you have to orient yourself. Which is anterior part, which is posterior part? This is a temporal bone, okay? So what is the anterior part and what is the posterior part? Have you by now you have estimated? This is anterior part, this is posterior part. Why? This is zygomatic bone. This is styloid process facing anteriorly. So clearly this is the anterior part. This is superior, this is inferior. So this is the opening of the external auditory canal. So what are the names? Let us come. Zygomatic abscess, very clearly, if the pus has gone, initially formed in the mastoid, gradually percolated its way and reached the zygomatic area, and here it has formed a huge abscess, then it is a zygomatic abscess. LUC'(S), Lux abscess, okay? You don't call it as Lux abscess, it is Lux abscess, and you have Lux forceps. In instruments you will study that same scientist, Lux abscess, okay? Now, this is when the abscess breaches through the external auditory canal. Meatal means canal. So, if this pus has percolated from the mastoid, breached the canal and is coming into the ear through the canal, then it is Lux or meatal abscess, okay? If it has breached through the wall outside the cortex, and it had the picture I have just shown you, that is subperiosteal abscess. If it has, this pus has ruptured through the tip. See, all cases will not go through all the roots. Some may go through this, some may go through this. Some patients it may rupture through the tip and then it may percolate its way through the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Here to the tip, which muscle is attached? Fibers of sternocleidomastoid. So then the pus will track its way down to the sternocleidomastoid and it will come out. That is known as Bezold's abscess. And if it comes anterior-inferiorly, it will involve the parapharyngeal or the retropharyngeal space, otherwise known as retropharyngeal or parapharyngeal abscess, through the peritubal. Now, what is peritubal? Eustachian tube. So, if the route of spread is via the cells surrounding the eustachian tube, you will develop a parapharyngeal abscess. So, now these terms will not appear complicated to you. Above it goes, it may reach the zygomatic abscess. Immediately in front, then Lux or meatal abscess. Externally through the mastoid cortex, breach subperiosteal abscess. Through the tip and via the sternocleidomastoid, you have Bezold's abscess. You have parapharyngeal abscess if it is around the eustachian tube. So, von Bezold's abscess, where? Tip cells, sternocleidomastoid. Lux abscess through the meatus. Zygomatic abscess through the zygomatic arch. Citelli's abscess, Citelli, what did I tell you? Sinodural angle. So, Citelli's abscess and para or retropharyngeal abscess. Okay, Citelli's abscess right here means the occipital region. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not that. It is through the occipital region. Okay, hematogenous spread. And then differential diagnosis. That means sometimes these kind of abscesses, they spread and then they come out through somewhere else. Correct? So, you may get confused that it is CSOM or is it something else. What are the other things that may come to your mind? Suppose a patient has come with an abscess somewhere on the neck, lateral side, sitting on the sternocleidomastoid adjacent to it. You may not think of CSOM in the first instance. You may think of tuberculosis, suppurative lymphadenitis. So, one possibility you should always remember is it can be coming from the ear. So, suppurative lymphadenopathy, superficial abscess, infected sebaceous cysts. These are the differential diagnoses which may be seen in case of subperiosteal abscesses. Okay. Post-auricular abscess. This is how a post-auricular abscess will look. Now, Bezold's and Citelli's. Yeah. So, Citelli is a neck swelling over posterior belly of digastric. That is what I was saying. And it will come out posteriorly. Okay. Now, Lux abscess. So, these all abscesses Lux abscess, retropharyngeal, parapharyngeal, you have to remember the terms, you have to remember the direction, the route of spread, and you have to remember one diagram. Coming to intratemporal complications, mastoiditis. So mastoiditis, what is it? Infection of the entire mucoperiosteal lining of the mastoid region is known as mastoiditis. Red edematous soft tissue is formed over the mastoid antrum, and since there is mastoiditis, there is inflammation, swelling. So the swelling, there is a swelling immediately behind the ear. Pinna is directed laterally, downward and forward. There is loss of post-auricular crease. What is post-auricular crease? The fold. You can insinuate, you can move your finger between the mastoid and the pinna. That thing you cannot do if there is a mastoiditis. There is fullness, so that post-auricular groove is lost. There is otorrhea, the patient is having CSO, so there is episodes of otorrhea, localized reactive lymphadenopathy, and sometimes pain is the only presenting feature. Early stage there will be pain, the swelling has not yet occurred. So what is the starting point? Eustachian tube. Eustachian tube is the main culprit, always remember. So aditus, eustachian tube has blocked, there has been impending middle ear exchange has damaged, secretions have occurred, they in turn have blocked the aditus. What is aditus? The pathway between or the connection between middle ear and mastoid. Then aditus is blocked, failure of drainage and stasis or collection of secretions. More and more secretions or pus-like fluid gets accumulated and it cannot come out, it will lead to bone dissolution. Hyperemic, the proper term is hyperemic decalcification, it will eat away the bone. Resorption of bony septa of air cells, ultimately all that intervening bony septa will be eaten up by the pus, coalescence of small air cells to form a single large cavity. And then since that single large cavity now is filled with pus, it is known as empyema, empyema of mastoid cavity. So can you realize this whole mastoid air cells is now filled with pus. So this condition no doubt is very painful. Commonly seen in children. It can be seen as a sequelae of ASOM also, and 25% of coalescent mastoiditis is seen in sclerotic temporal bone. Now what is this? This is nothing but a theory to explain the etiopathogenesis, how it is developing. People have seen, see I told you, no, there is a normal distribution. Some people have more of pneumatic or cellular mastoid, more of air. Some people tend to have more of sclerotic. That is congenitally the mastoid has more of bone and less of air. So it's now common sense, if it has less of air, so less of ventilatory surface, less of gaseous exchange, more of stasis of secretion. So these people are more prone to develop CSO or coalescent mastoiditis as a sequelae. Now here this is nothing but the pathogenesis. Once mastoiditis will develop, either it will spontaneously resolve, how there will be a perforation of the tympanic membrane and the pus will flow out, or else it will persist and then the aditus will be blocked, and further gradual osteoclastic activity and demineralization will eat away all the air cells or the bony septations, leading to coalescent mastoiditis. Complications thereafter can occur. So this is, you can say, a flowchart presentation. If you are asked a pathogenesis of mastoiditis, this is how you should represent. Instead of writing 2 pages, 5 pages, you waste your time. You remember the important terms, and this is how you should plan to write your theory papers. More and more of flowcharts and diagrams. Okay. So once demineralization occurs, you get subperiosteal abscess. You can get all type of intratemporal and intracranial complications, and even as far as petrous apex, then you will get petrositis. So how will the patient present? Otorrhea, that is discharge from the ear for more than 3 weeks with pain, fever. Mastoid reservoir sign, I have already told you. Mastoid reservoir sign. Yeah, so this is a problem with this kind of a class. You guys are having a good time. I cannot ask you questions. We can have an assessment exam, of course. So, what is mastoid reservoir sign? Constant source of pus coming out from the mastoid. And how do you know that? The moment you clean the ear, again it fills up. Again you clean the ear, immediately it will fill up. So that means there is a storehouse somewhere from where it is coming. Sagging of posterior superior canal wall due to periosteitis. Now what happens? What is the meaning of this? So the terms you focus: otorrhea, pain, fever, mastoid reservoir sign, sagging. Sagging, you know what is sagging? You have seen Lakshman Jhula. So over the years it has sagged down. So a rope for a long time will sag. So sagging means bowing down. Here they are saying the posterior canal wall due to continuous periosteitis, that posterior canal wall is bowing down to the increased pressure of the pus which is forming within the mastoid. And then how do we see it? If you look into the external canal of these patients, you will see the canal is narrowed. Why? The posterior wall of the canal is nothing but boundary of mastoid, correct? That has continuously bowed down because of the pressure. So the posterior superior canal wall seems to be sagging because of periosteitis. Now, ironed out appearance of skin over mastoid. Again, this is a very important sign of mastoiditis. Normally, the skin over the mastoid, if you see, it is not smooth, it is rugged. You try to, you keep your finger over your mastoid. Right now you keep it and then you try to press, just roll your fingers over your mastoid. You will see it has certain indentations, up, down. Okay, it's not very smooth. But a patient of mastoiditis will have a very smooth mastoid. Why? Because of thickened periosteum. So these ridges will go and it will be an ironed out appearance of skin over the mastoid. Mastoid tenderness is present and all signs of inflammation will be there. ESR raised, blood counts raised, mastoid cavity in X-ray, you will see a big large cavity in the mastoid region. And ear swab culture, if you take a culture and do a sensitivity from the pus of that of the ear, then you can even know what kind of organisms are harboring there. So this is nothing but a mastoid reservoir sign. Can you see the pus which is continuously coming? This is a large perforation the patient is having, okay? But it is looking like a large central perforation. And continuous discharge of pus. These kind of patients, even if you clean, even if you mop the patient, immediately it will fill up. So this is known as mastoid reservoir sign. And this is what I was talking about. Posterior sagging of canal walls. This canal wall, this was normally the dimension of the canal wall was like this. The posterior aspect has now sagged. So now the lumen is only this much. Okay, the shiny structure you can see is the tympanic membrane. So these are all telltale signs of mastoiditis. And this is how externally it will look. The smooth ironed out appearance of the mastoid. So this is how it looks. And you can see the swelling with absence of post-auricular crease. The groove is lost. On X-ray, what will you see? Coalescence of cells. All the cells now have unified together because the intervening bony septations are gone. So it is looking like one big cavity here. Okay. Here one thing you have to know. Sometimes all the features that I told you of mastoiditis, sometimes a patient can come. This is a very important differential diagnosis of mastoiditis, that is furunculosis. You all know what is a furuncle, right? Staph aureus infection of the hair follicles. If it is of the hair follicles of the external auditory canal, then it is furunculosis of external auditory canal. Sometimes, suppose a patient has furuncle, especially in the posterior wall of the external auditory canal. This patient will present with almost similar features of mastoiditis. Why? It's very painful, tender, he'll have fever, he touch the pinna, he will shout because it's very painful. The pinna is protruded or faced little outwards Why? Because there is a swelling in the posterior canal wall, so it is occupying that space. But one important difference is there. You know what? Remember, the patient of furunculosis, his extra-aortic canal has a furuncle, but his mastoid is absolutely normal, right? Furunculosis is a disease of external ear, nothing to do with middle ear or inner ear. So these mastoids are perfectly normal. So what is the difference then? Mastoid region will be non-tender. Second, the post-auricular groove will be maintained. In fact, because the swelling is anterior to the groove, in case of furunculosis, okay, so the post-auricular groove will be deepened or increased in case of furunculosis. These two are very, very important signs of active furunculosis. It will be tender, no doubt, there will be a swelling. But the mastoid region, if you press on the mastoid tip, it is not tender. Rather, the pinna movement is tender, and the post-auricular groove is even more increased in case of furunculosis. But in mastoiditis, the groove is totally lost. Okay. Tragal tenderness will be there, and because it is an acute infective condition, post-auricular lymph nodes will be enlarged in furunculosis. Okay, this is a chronic condition. Now, how will you manage these kind of patients? You have to, because these patients are acute, febrile, so you can admit the patient, because why? These patients can develop mastoid abscess. This mastoiditis, if not controlled, will develop into mastoid abscess. What will happen if there is a mastoid abscess? You already know. From itis, it has become an abscess. So now that it has become abscess, it will form pus, it will rupture, it will spread to adjacent areas and cause all sort of complications. So better, you have to admit the patient, give him antibiotics, resolve the infection, then plan for a surgery. Cortical mastoidectomy is the ideal surgery we plan. And what will happen if the patient is not responding, or you have not admitted, or you have not given the treatment? What will happen? New complications will occur. Subperiosteal abscess, which I just told you, it will go everywhere. And yeah, incision drainage of subperiosteal abscess is very important. What happens if the patient comes with acute pus in the ear? You have to do an incision drainage over the mastoid region to drain out the pus. Okay. Now coming to the complications. These are the extratemporal complications. Now one by one we will be doing it. All these are extracranial. Remember, intracranial complications will come later. But all the extracranial complications will be, we have just discussed what are the adjacent regions, petrous apex, so petrositis, facial nerve involvement, then facial nerve paralysis, labyrinthitis. If cochlea is involved, then there will be sensory neural hearing loss, and mastoiditis. Mastoiditis we have discussed, we will be discussing the remaining 4. So petrositis, for this you need to know the anatomy of petrous apex. You all know, let me see, okay. You all know you guys have idea about the skull base. In first year you have studied the skull base in great detail, and it's the time now. If you still have the bone with you, look into it. Otherwise, at least look into a proper diagram of skull base and locate the petrous apex. Otherwise, you cannot understand petrositis. Normally, petrous apex, just like you have pneumatization of the mastoid, you have pneumatization of the petrous apex. This is nothing but the type of pneumatization seen in petrous apex. Okay, type of air cells that are present in the petrous apex, and thereby the drainage pathway of the petrous apex. So this is nothing but pneumatization of the petrous apex. It can be posterior superior part or anterior inferior. That means pus formed in the middle ear can reach the petrous apex by either of the two ways. What are the ways? Infralabyrinthine, that is from attic. You all know, by now you know what is attic. Middle ear, you have epitympanum, mesotympanum, hypotympanum. Epitympanum, otherwise known as attic. So attic, antrum, from there semicircular canal, from there apex. And otherwise another route of spread is from hypotympanum, it goes to the eustachian tube, cochlea, and from there it will go to the petrous apex. So these are just the two pathways. Acute petrositis presents clinically with 3 cardinal features, and this syndrome is very very important. Please remember this name, Grady-Negos syndrome, with 3 cardinal features. That is why I said anatomy of petrous apex is very important. What are the 3 features? First is otorrhea. Obviously the patient is a patient of CSOM, so otorrhea. No efforts in remembering one feature of Grady-Negos syndrome. Second feature, please remember petrous apex is very closely related with 2 prominent cranial nerves. One is the 6th cranial nerve and one is the 5th cranial nerve. So 6th cranial nerve involvement leads to diplopia or lateral rectus palsy, and 5th cranial nerve involvement will lead to deep-seated retroorbital or oral pain. This is because of the trigeminal nerve involvement. So 6th and 5th in cranial nerve involvement and otorrhea, 3 things together known as Grady-Negos syndrome. Typical Grady-Negos syndrome is rare. What happens is actually nowadays with aggressive use of antibiotics and people coming to the hospital early, so the infection is usually controlled before it reaches this stage. Now, often associated with Grady-Negos syndrome, they'll have other constitutional symptoms of cochleovestibular involvement and facial weakness. But Grady-Negos syndrome as such involves these 3 features. Please remember it. Deep-seated retroorbital pain, diplopia and otorrhea. So what is the treatment? How will you treat these patients? Long-term high-dose systemic antibiotics. So for a longer duration, even for 10 days or 14 days, you may need to give it high-dose systemic antibiotics. If the pus is too much, you have to release the pus, right? The pus has to come out through somewhere. So you just do a myringotomy and release the pus. Corticosteroids, if you feel that nerve compression is occurring, then we give corticosteroids. Surgery is, ultimately you have to remove the cause, you have to do a proper mastoidectomy to remove all the pus. And if petrous abscess, then you have to also, along with a neurosurgeon, you have to perform this surgery and drain out all the pus. Simple mastoidectomy. And this is, you have to preserve the cochlea and you have to do the surgery so that hearing is preserved. Now, coming to involvement of the labyrinth. I don't think we'll be able to complete the complications in this class. So do one thing, you study the anatomy of petrous apex before the next class, okay? Otherwise, it will be of no point. So you just brush up your knowledge about anatomy of petrous apex, labyrinth, cochlea. Then we will discuss the remaining complications and we can complete it. In the next class, we'll cover it. And once your CSOM is covered, your major aspect will be covered. Then we will just touch and go on the main topics. And time and again I'm telling you, if you have any important area of interest which you want me to focus on, you are most welcome. You please let me know. Then we can accordingly plan. Alright, so let us stop here. The remaining we will be discussing in the next class. Okay then, have a good day.